Hello, the Alaloth, the champions of the Four Kingdoms. This is a short and brief review about this game. So, the developer is the Gamera Interactive, and the publisher is also Gamera Interactive, combining classic and modern game designs and simplicity and featuring a world created in collaboration with the Chris Avalon. Alaloth, the Champions of the Four Kingdoms, looked right from its reveal as the game that could bring a welcome breath of the fresh air, top-down role-playing games. The most intriguing feature of the role-playing game by Gamera Interactive is definitely the combat system inspired by Form Software series, but labeling the game as the simple isometric Soul would be a disservice as the lot of things besides its involving combat system which comes together really well despite some issues here and there that have a significantly slight impact on experience as a whole. Alaloth Champions of the World Kingdoms is set of playment, a content where four kingdoms have prospered since ancient times. At some point, however, the harmony of the continent was broken by the demon Alaloth, who managed to defend the many gods worshipped by the people of the four kingdoms that were constantly at odds with one another and establish his dominion on playment with the fifth kingdom. Centuries after Alaloth starved sowing chairs of the platform, on the planet, the people of the four kingdoms have had enough of the demon and elected their champions to recover the light of Weismil to get access of the fifth kingdom and send back Alaloth from the when it came. The story overview about the breakily skims the surface of what Alaloth Champions of the Four Kingdom offers in the terms of story, lore, and world building. It is one of the very few games I've ever played makes its world feels as such as being alive it should be, featuring countless locations, including cities, towns, and other points of interest for each kingdom. Inside each of these locations, players can find additional information on the world history it's happening, internal strife, and so on. They are not superficial events that are just skimmed over but future certain level of complexity that makes them feel like they belong in a fantasy novel. The presence of different companions, all with their own plight and dedicated storyline, also adds a touch of more personal involvement that the story of the Large seems to be lacking at bit times. But even so, for those who love the fantasy genre, Alaloth Champions of the Four Kingdoms has a lot of them to delve into. The world is so big and with so many permutations, thus depending on the race and alignment of the champion, that a single playthrough is not enough to experience everything it has to offer. While the story is clearly inspired by Tolkien's masterpiece, The Lord of the Rings, the lore of Dragons and Dungeons, Spawned Realms, and so on, Alaloth, Champion of the Four Kingdoms, shows the developer attitude of innovation within a tradition in gameplay, even before the actual campaign begins. Besides a straightforward main campaign as optimal local co-op, the game also features an extremely interesting competitive campaign that pits the player champion against those of the other kingdoms, challenging the player to reach the fifth kingdom and destroy Alaloth before any other champion does. This mode, needs to say, is not exactly suited for the first playthrough, given the complexity of the experience and need to be always on the point to stand ahead of the competition. Still, it's a very clear way to up the challenge level after the game mechanics have been mastered. As mentioned above, Alaloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms, is all about innovating within a traditional framework of creating your champions as a proper RPG fashion, picking the race between human, elf, dwarf, and orc, choosing a good for some additional benefits, and picking a weapon which no way restrains that character can wield during the course of the adventure. And you're giving the mission to destroy Alaloth, which involves recovering the Light of Weismil and complete a few more tasks. You can go about doing so, it's all up to you. You can focus on exploring the game many beautiful locations. Rendering is a visual style that is extremely close to classic CRPGs like the original Baldur's Gate, with the help of NPCs with woes and gets fully involved in the story of the Four Kingdoms. Or you can play the games as the Diablo, focusing only on clearing the fighting areas and the game actual dungeons. Gather loot and enhance your character as it levels up by increasing the stats, learning the perks, and the variety of the skills ranging weapon specific skills for weapon types and elemental spells. While playing the game as Diablo may not be the best way to go, as you would miss much of the game's story and world building, it is absolutely viable and enjoyable, mostly thanks to the game combat system, which takes more than a few pages from the Souls series book. The combat system of Alaloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms, is both one of the best features on the game feature that somewhat drags the experience down, depending on how the player tackles the experience. Gamera Interactive has undoubtedly did a solid job bringing the mechanics that make Souls-like combat what it is, such as stamina management, position and weight, and commitment to perform moves, but in my opinion, fell into the same trappings most development teams that are not from software do. Right from going into the very first fighting area, it's clear how the combat system doesn't suit the game and counter design very much when playing solo. The Souls-like combat system is mostly meant for the duels or fighting against small groups of enemies, and not the hordes of mobs that are often encountered all over the playman, which force the player to learn a crowd control as a skill quickly as possible, often enlist the help of companions. Even so, the game and counter design often forces a hit, run, fighting style that becomes state as adventure proceeds. And the fighting single or only a couple of the enemies, however the combat system truly shines, featuring a rewarding PvE system and movesets for each weapon type that feels weighty and impactful, forcing the player's balance offense and defense to make it out a fighting area live. Unfortunately, the combat mechanics don't get too much time to shine, even not counting enemy groups being too big for Souls-like combat. Due to the game of the current balance, a strat dueling wield build, for example, works well, but there is, in my opinion, no reason to try other builds if it's not the variation. Some skills are very also may more useful than others, mostly due to the long recovery time of the champion and the sword's recovery time on hit from enemies, which further limits the availability of the several builds. The developer, however, is working on the balancing mobs, stats, and the other aspects of the combat system for the soon-to-be-released one version on the Beyond, so the good chance that all talk about won't be an issue in the game futures versions. So, Alaloth Champions of the Four Kingdoms is one of the most intriguing roll-and-play games released in recent years, while some design choices such as Souls-like combat system that doesn't work too well with diabolical games like encounters in the current version of the game impact the experience. Gamera Interactive blended elements of the both traditional and modern RPGs rather well, creating an experience that is more than worthy of the RPG fun time. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. And yeah, you have a wonderful weekend or whatever day of the week it is. Peace.